Hey everyone! So I thought today it would be fun to go over a Snowflake lay of the land. We've sort of done things like this in the past with Alteryx so that we have an idea of sort of how to use the UI, different names for different things in the UI as a whole. I know that we've gone over Snowflake a little bit in the past with our blog posts and everything, which you can take a look at on continuoustechnologies.com/blog, which I have visible here. But I thought I would show the UI as a whole. So we have ours configured using Azure AD. So I just click my login using Azure AD. And it brings me to our landing page, which is in East US 2 for Azure. You can also use AWS or Google Cloud Platform. Both are really good options, and it will bring you to your Snowflake environment. So let's take a look at the breadcrumb trail at the top. So we have databases, shares, warehouses, worksheets, history, and account. Those are all visible because I am a security admin right now. To change my context or role, you can go to the side where you see your name and then your role. Go to switch role. And for example, everyone is granted public by default. So when I click public, it will show a different breadcrumb trail up on the top. So here, you can see that I actually just lost accounts. So I can't necessarily see that granular detail. That sort of helps with security and making sure that your public user can't necessarily see everything that a security admin can. For this sake, I'm just going to change back to security admin. So security admin, you will usually use for like user creation or user modifications. There is also account admin, which you should use sparingly. There should only be like a couple people that are account admin. They typically don't recommend going like over 3 necessarily, unless you absolutely need to. They recommend having 2 because if you need someone to reset a password or an account admin's password, you need one of their account admin to do so. So typically I don't work in that account admin context because it has a higher power than all other roles. So let's look at databases. So here we can take a look at all of our different databases that we have. This is sort of just like a demo Snowflake environment, just for the use case of showing it off. So we don't have a ton built out, but for example, we can click into our database demo DB, and we can take a look at our different tables. So this gives you details on sort of the size of it, who created it, who owns it, if you had any comments. So for example, this was loaded from an Excel file, and I noted that in the comments, and different sizing. You can also go down to a more granular view by clicking into that table even further. So this gives you your column names and how you sort of specified setting up your columns. You can also see views, schemas, your stages, and file formats. Also, sequences are at the end. File formats is usually what you're going to use if you're loading data and you have the same kind of data for a bunch of different loads. So for example, those Excel files, they were all very common. They were all comma delimited. So I specified that in the file format and used that to load the data. So here we have shares. I'm not going to go super in depth on that today, but if you were to share with an external Snowflake environment, you could use that via shares. Let's go into warehouses really quick. So here we have a few different warehouses, and you can see how we specified them. So for example, testing and compute, we have set up as maximized. So when it kicks up, it will already be at the maximum state that it will potentially run at. You can set these as high as 10, I believe. So then you would have 10 servers running at the same time. That's really good if you're running a ton of parallel processes and you need to get through those parallel processes very quickly. You can also specify the size via a t-shirt size, and that basically will determine how large of a warehouse you will have and then how many clusters within that warehouse. So it amplifies essentially your clusters. You want to watch this because of pricing and how much you're going to be spending to process your data. There's a point where it's not optimal to size to a huge amount. There's really a sweet spot for where to process your data. To figure that out, they recommend using some test data and sort of testing where that sweet spot is and then sizing your warehouses according to that. Again, since this is sort of like our demo, we just size them as smaller sizes. I did have an auto scale here, which is our bids warehouse. So once it starts queuing up files and processes, it will then start up another cluster, which is neat because then it'll process those subsequent queued files while processing the one that was sort of holding up everything else. So really good to stay efficient. And let's take a look at our worksheets. So you can see off to the side all of our database objects. So we have our database, our schema, and then our tables. So we're just looking at DemoDB for an example. And you can see that I have a few different queries that I was running earlier. We can just do a select star with a limit of 10, which is a little bit different than SQL syntax, but that's one statement that I find is a little bit more different, but it's very similar to ANSI SQL. And we can see on the bottom, this is our results pane, just like you'd expect in SQL. And you can select all your columns if you didn't want to see some, for example. So say I just wanted to see school year, agency type, and let's maybe choose district name. Agency type was clearly a bad example, and you can just pare down what you'd want to see. You can also download your data and export the information. You can either do tab separated or comma delimited, and you can also name. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's an option, and you can copy your results into a TSV format. You can also open your history. So if I were to run this same statement again, we can now see that there are two separate runs and how long they took for each. This sort of brings me into my next discussion about caching. So there is a results cache. So if a same query is ran within 24 hours, it will pull that information from the cache, which will run a lot quicker than if it was ran from a cold state. And you can sort of see that here. Much quicker duration. We're down to 177 milliseconds versus that 2.13 seconds. This isn't a ton of data, so it's going to run a lot quicker than maybe like a lot of terabytes, but it is relatively quick in Snowflake to begin with. So that's just an example of sort of where you see that savings is running from your results cache. You can also switch the context of your worksheets in different worksheets. So on this worksheet 1, we can see that I have a sysadmin, my warehouse is bids warehouse, database being DemoDB, and the schema being public. Let's open a new worksheet, and we'll just copy my select statement, for example. And we'll throw it in the new worksheet. And let's change our context just to play around. So I'll say I'm a sysadmin. We can specify our warehouse to be a different warehouse if we'd like. I'll just keep it on bids warehouse. You can specify your database, but fully qualifying it will already specify that for you. But say you didn't have that, and you just want to do public enrollment, for example. We can specify our database here, so that way it understands the context. and our public schema. And we can give this a run, and we'll see the same results. We'll see those 10 results. Let's take a look at our history. And again, it's pretty quick. But different context for different sheets. Again, sysadmin here. And here I was processing as a sysadmin. So let's change this one to security admin. Poor example when you don't know what your role is in your other worksheet. All right, so process this as a security admin. Same functionality. You see the very quick results coming back. This worksheet is a sysadmin. This is a security admin. Different roles for different sheets. So we can also take a look at our history of different runs that we have. So for example, you can filter up on the top. So we're just looking at my runs, and you can see the total duration. The different color coding matches different functionality and like where it's pulling the data from. You can really do a lot of query identification here and sort of figure out what's taking a lot of time, maybe what's eating into your costs. You can also take a look at maybe some people aren't running very efficient queries, which again, Snowflake handles very well, but if you really want to optimize things, you could take a look at your history and narrow in on that. You can also figure out which query you were running. So a fun way to see that is to take a look at your query ID. Here's your ID, and you can copy that, go to your history, change to the query ID for a filter, and that will just bring up that specific query ID. So we can see here that we have our SQL text, it was me, which warehouse we ran it on, total duration, when we started running that query and when we ended running that query. Gives you really good information and granularity on what's going on in your warehouse and what queries are sort of being ran. Last thing I'll go over is our account here. So here we can see a few different things. I'm not going to necessarily show our usage, but you can see how often things are being used, along with the association with costs and credits. So Snowflake uses credits, which then equivalent to a cost that you're actually paying. You can hook up a credit card via your billing. You can take a look at your users. And here we can sort of see if they're enabled, what their login name, when they were created, what their default warehouse is. And we can do modifications in the screen as our security admin. You can see different roles that people can be attributed to. So for example, if you have custom roles, you're going to want to assign those to sysadmin. So that way that sysadmin can actually do work and sort of see what's being created as content. Without that visibility, custom roles can just create things out of nowhere and you don't really know what's going on overall. You can also take a look at resource monitors, for example. And you can set up a resource monitor so that way you can sort of cap off the usage of a virtual warehouse without incurring a bunch of extra fees. So say here we only want to spend 100 credits. It's going to stop once it hits 100, and that's usually a hard stop. You don't get to process anymore, and then you won't incur those extra fees. This is really handy for things that maybe aren't auto-suspended. So that way, if someone leaves it running over the weekend for some reason, and you're being very credit conscientious, it's going to turn that off anyways. So you're not going to incur this incredible bill and then you're going to get yelled at for anything. One final thing I'll go over here is you can click the help button and you can view documentation, you can visit the community, you can also download different features and connectors. So here is where you can get your SnowSQL to then set up that SnowPipe. Different drivers. So say you're using Alteryx, you can download the driver and connect via Alteryx. And there's a few different fun things that you can play around with. Really great for functionality and just fun to overall use and figure out with Snowflake. So thank you so much for taking the time to go over the lay of the land with me, and I hope you learned a lot. We're going to be doing more videos like this to sort of get people exposed to Snowflake and start just playing around and showing sort of the fun capabilities that Snowflake has. So I hope you'll join me on the next video and hope everyone's staying safe out there.